Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question for you, Ms. Carter, but we do appreciate CRS. We appreciate all of your knowledge and just CRS in general. You all do a great job and probably aren't thanked enough by us as we try and get things together. So give yourself a big pat on the back.
Those type of comments are what keeps us going, so thank you.
We do appreciate you. Mr. Robinson, to capitalize on America's changing economy, it's clear that necessary infrastructure improvements must be made to our inland waterways and ports. Arkansas and Oklahoma have been working for years to deepen the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River navigation system so barges and boats can carry larger loads, I think about 40% greater load. So it's very, very significant. Senator Inhofe and I both understand, and certainly we appreciate his leadership, but also the national significance of a 12-foot channel versus what we have now. And we're going to work really hard in WERDA 2018 to try and get that accomplished. Can you explain why the 12-foot channel would be a benefit?
Well, as you said, Senator Boozman.
And not just for Arkansas and Oklahoma, but for the country as a whole.
Yeah, well, let me give you an example. And you know Scott McGeorge with Pine Bluff Sand and Gravel, operating a rock quarry there in Pine Bluff area, the closest rock quarry to New Orleans in the country. And so Scott McGeorge and Pine Bluff Sand and Gravel weren't able to compete when the New Orleans needed rock desperately. And so as a nation, we paid more for that rock than we otherwise would have because we weren't willing to deepen the channel. Or we started the channel, but we didn't complete it. We didn't go forward with it.
Along that line, I have great concern in the sense that as recently as 2016, Bob Portis expressed concern that the critical backlog on the MCARNs, was of that nature. That number's now ballooned to $143 million in less than 2 years. If we can continue to kick the can down the road and do not address the critical backlog, talk about that. Talk about how the effect of it if we actually had to shut the system down. Again, not only for Arkansas and Oklahoma, but for the rest of the country. Also, according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 58% of locks and dams are past their 50-year life expectancy. Talk about, if we could do some more things, the positive effect that would.
The locks and dams on the MCARNs are 47 years old. I realize that locks and dams on the rest of the system in the nation are older than that, but one of the reasons that the backlog of critical maintenance is growing at such an alarming rate is because we're nearing the end of the 50-year life that most projects like that have from an engineering standpoint. So we're discovering new things every time we dewater a lock, and we do that quite often in order to make sure that we're keeping up with the maintenance that needs to be done. Unfortunately, the funds aren't available to do the maintenance even when we know they need to be done. If the MCARNs were shut down as a result of failure of the system in one way or another, then we have calculated that the cost in Oklahoma would be $2 million a day. That's a significant cost to shippers, to port and terminal operators, and to the nation. It's just not a good way to do business. These projects were justified on expectations that the benefits would exceed the cost. They have done that. There's significant earnings to the government, to the federal government, that go into the Treasury. It's not a matter of not enough benefits and revenues. It's a matter of using those revenues for other purposes.
Mr. Friedman, a top priority for the chairman and ranking member for the entire committee is passing a WERDA bill. We went through a period from 2007 to 2014 where we had a gap. 2014, 2016, we've gotten back on track. Can you talk about what it means to have certainty with having a WERDA bill every 2 years to address these problems?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. Yes, it's critically important for the port industry, the maritime industry, to have a WERDA reauthorized every 2 years or on a regular cycle, because adjustments need to be made to the new construction start authorizations as projects are designed and then being built. That, as we know, the Army Corps has been plagued with projects that string out for many, many years, adding cost. It hurts the competitiveness of the nation if we can't complete these harbor improvement projects, complete these deepenings. So a gap of 7 years, as you mentioned, is very, very harmful. It also gives us an opportunity to address the issue that was brought up in terms of transparency and sort of opening up the decision-making process at the core, the so-called black box, which we think would be good for all stakeholders to be able to have input to modernize the benefit-cost ratio, to make sure we're funding the best projects for the nation. So AAPA is strongly in favor of getting back to the regular order on WRDA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.